question for you.
Okay,
Well, I've actually
sure.
two questions for
Okay.
you. The first one is, what are the most typical problems that you run into with your clients?
I mean, I would say actually scalability, because what I find is we can develop technology, we can develop capabilities.
Could you give a clear example of a scalability issue? Like, think of a client and like, this is a scalability problem.
Right, okay. So I specialize in enterprise data. So being able to scale out an enterprise data environment means you're supporting multiple lines of businesses or corporate functions or enabling functions for the company. So how do we ensure that we have all of the foundational capabilities? How do we ensure that we have a way of operating and working with those business units and corporate functions to make sure that they can be successful? So that means we have budget aligned, we have people aligned, we have capabilities invested in that are pre-prescribed, and it allows us to scale in a manner that they need and to meet their business drivers.
So the next question I have is actually kind of aligned with that. Can you give us the life cycle of an engagement with a client? Like, when they call, what do they usually say that makes you say, yeah, we can help you? Other than they have money, which, you know, that helps. But when, you know, how can you, you get that click when it's like, this is a client we can help.
Right.
What do you hear, and then how do you engage? How long does it take, and so forth and so on?
Right. So, I mean, it really depends on the problem, the use case and the problem. Certainly, our consultancy, Protiviti, we cover a variety of areas. So obviously, it's something in our ballpark. We certainly are interested. But in the data space, I'll use an example of someone calls, they're looking to migrate to cloud. They haven't actually established that environment. We start to have discussions based on if they're looking for a greenfield build, what does their current environment look like, right? So we may do an initial assessment to really understand where they are, what they've invested in, where their direction has been. We then might pilot something to really just iron out and exercise, the capabilities, make sure it meets the business need, and then we would scale, right?
And how long would that take, approximately?
Really, an assessment could be 4 to 6 weeks, right? As far as understanding their current state, a pilot could be anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the use case and the example. We try to make them shorter, quicker, right, to get some. And then scaling, it just depends on the size of the organization
and where they were to start with.
Right, right.
Exactly.
We do encourage people sometimes to think about, if they have scalability problems today, maybe think about a lift and shift, right? How do we then iterate and improve so it's not taking too long to value, right? So you can drive some value more immediately. But it depends on the use case and where they are today, obviously.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions for Wendy before we wrap up? Slightly early this time. Jerry, you're waving your hand, or was that just your stretching?
Right, right. So certainly, right, I would use an example of a company I was previously with. We did quite a bit of merger and acquisition, so we had a playbook for that, right? And how do we think about dealing with day one, right, day 30 to 90, and how do we think about that beyond? Obviously, when you're purchasing a company, you're typically looking for efficiency of scale. So how do I start to target, build those target systems, make sure that I have a plan for rationalizing those systems and processes? I do sometimes start with data, right? So I can start to, close my books sooner. I can do some top-of-house reporting. Maybe I can combine some regulatory or statutory reporting needs, right? So these are the things, all the major business functions, I decide on how I might do that day 1 through day 30, and then maybe so on, right? But I want to build that playbook and make sure that I have a process in which I can consume that and drive the efficiencies. And typically, I decide on what's the best platforms, those target platforms, and I build that plan to get there. So that's what we've seen mostly in these playbooks, is how do we operate and what are the most critical functions we need to address as a combined organization day 1, and then at 90 and 120 and so on.
Okay, and we have a question from Raj. You mentioned an agile construct to be in place all the way from technology, business, and executive leadership. What sorts of challenges do you still encounter when implementing such an agile construct?
Well, I mean, you have to have predefined agreement, right? I mean, in my opinion, right, you want to work with each function, each stakeholder group, and within IT, and build that organizational construct that is a combined, agile team, right? It's the only way you're going to gain buy-in. You're going to make sure that you're going to be successful to those priorities of that business organization, and be truly aligned and be able to report to that, right? I'll use an example of a prior company. Came in, things were falling apart, right? We were having SLA breaches, and really it was about getting everybody on the same page. Hey, where are we today? what do we want to do? What are your priorities? This is where we are. How do we get there together? And then you start to decompose that problem and build that backlog. And that has to be a shared accountability. It can't be on IT, it can't be on business. It really has to be a combined effort across both organizations, or all organizations,
Well, I want to push on that a little bit. Have you ever been successful in a case where senior management was paying lip service to Agile, but everybody else bought in?
I would say so, but I'm not an agilist either, right? So I'm a practical technologist, I would say. So, you know, I say I don't hang on to words, right? How do we work best? How do we make sure we deliver outcomes? I think proof is in the pudding, right? So if you can deliver and be successful, people typically jump on board, right? So what that Agile framework looks like for you may be different, but it definitely encompasses those different organizational pillars and stakeholders.
So to restate what I think I heard you say, if you run into a scenario where senior management is skeptical of Agile, you just change the words and do what you were going to do anyway.
And prove it. And be
prove it.
successful.
Exactly.
And be successful, right.
Okay, great. Well, Wendy, thank you very much.